Hello, Ellsworth. It's the next instalment, the final instalment. So what did you think was going to happen to Mr. Dog and the bunnies? Well, you don't have to wait any longer. This is it. This is where you find out what happens. Let's go. Mr. Dog led Socks, Shoe, Flip-Flop and Sneaker after Hassan in a crocodile. The archaeologist went first to a shed full of tools to check it hadn't been disturbed. Mr. Dog and the others hid behind a dustbin while he did so. Hassan's second place to visit was the snack van. He checked the shutters were still secure, pulled on the handle to open the door, and looked inside. Mr. Dog caught a wonderful whiff of sausages, one of his favourite foods. But under that he caught a very different smell wafting faintly on the breeze from across the site. Rabbits, he breathed. Lots and lots of rabbits. Working out the wind direction, he looked across the site, past a pair of big tents to a large rickety lean-to, built up against a section of the fence. A door with 2 bolts, top and bottom, secured the way in. Come on, Hassan, thought Mr. Dog. Get checking over there. But Hassan did not go in the lean-to's direction. Instead, he made for one of the tents. Mr. Dog and his group followed cautiously again, but the mutt called a stop when Hassan walked straight past the lean-to check on another generator. With a sinking feeling, he realised that Hassan was only checking up on things he thought were valuable to the site, and he had amply demonstrated that rabbits, in his view, were anything but. Besides, the bolts on the door would make it impossible for anyone but a human being to make their way inside. Hassan would never check on the lean-to. Change of plan, muttered Mr. Dog, leading the way swiftly but stealthily towards the lean-to. Rabbits, I'm sure your mother is inside that shelter. We just need to find a way to get into her. The animals had a couple of close calls. Socks knocked over a broom that brought Hassan dangerously close to discovering them. Mr. Dog just managed to herd his posse back behind some paving slabs in time. They barely moved to the shelter of a large tarpaulin hanging from a washing line when Jo, the other archaeologist, walked past. She had collected the shards of broken pottery in a small plastic basin and was ready to try to put the pieces back together. Socks rose up to whisper in Mr. Dog's ear. That lady reminds me of my owner. Except Jo actually seems to be fond of rabbits, thought Mr. Dog sadly. Wait here, bunnies, he whispered. I'm just going to scout out that lean-to see if I can find a way in for all of us. As he started away, Socks came after him. He glanced back, checking that Shoe, Flip-Flop and Sneaker couldn't hear. Mr. Dog, he said, nose twitching, you do think my owner is coming back for me, don't you? Mr. Dog hesitated. No, Socks. I'm afraid I don't, and I think deep down you know too. Socks gave a quiet, shivery sigh. They should have come back for me at once, shouldn't they? He shook his head helplessly. Why would they take me out into the wild? What did I do to make them want to get rid of me? I let children pick me up. I never bit anyone. It wasn't your fault. Mr. Dog gave a supportive nudge with his nose. Sometimes people get pets with good intentions, but things change. Perhaps they had to move abroad or to a house with no garden. Perhaps they couldn't afford to look after you anymore. Or perhaps they decided that a pet was just too much of a tie. He sighed. People can be silly and selfish. I'm sorry. Thank you, said Socks. He washed his whiskers and twitched his floppy ears. Well, anyway, Sneaker, Flip-Flop and Shoe deserve to be with their mother. Let's find her. Yes, Socks, let's. Mr. Dog grinned. Come on, you check one side of the lean-to and I'll check the other. The lean-to had recently been painted and Mr. Dog's nose was overwhelmed by the smell. The door was securely bolted so they couldn't get in that way. And though the shelter looked rough in places, the wooden walls nailed and braced together quite clumsily, It was strong enough to resist them breaking in. Mr. Dog doubled back to talk to Socks. "Did you find any sneaky ways inside?" "None," said Socks sadly. "How can we get to the rabbits locked up in there?" Mr. Dog looked at Socks. "I've got a plan, but it's risky. Whatever happens to me, you must get Shoe, Flip-Flop and Sneaker back to their mother. They can't last much longer." "Me?" Socks cringed. "Alone?" "You can do this. You have to." He gave Socks a pointed look. "They're family, remember?" Socks drooped his ears. "Yes, all right, you can rely on me." "I know," Mr. Dog said before smiling and nudging Socks towards the bunnies. Then he got on his back legs and banged his front paws against the door of the lean-to, rattling it as hard as he could. The bolts held, but the noise was like a gun firing, and the rabbits inside gave a chorus of nervous squeaks. "Come on, Hussan," thought Mr. Dog. "You've got to investigate this." Sure enough, Hussan soon appeared, poking his head out from one of the buildings. He hurried towards the lean-to, and Mr. Dog quickly ran and hid behind it. "Good man," he thought. "For all you know, whatever made that noise is inside." With relief, he heard the scrape of the bolts and the wooden door creak open. The squeaking of dozens of rabbits filled the air as Hussan went in. "Squeak, squeak, 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 squeak." Mr. Dog reappeared from hiding and looked over to where Socks was waiting worriedly with Shoe, Flip-Flop and Sneaker. "Good luck," he whispered. Then he turned back to the door and barked as loudly as he could. "Woof! Woof! Woof!" Hussan immediately came outside again, frowning at the sight of Mr. Dog. Mr. Dog charged towards him and jumped up enthusiastically, pushing Hussan backwards before springing away to sit in the doorway, tongue hanging out, panting. "What the?" said Hussan. "It's you again, the stray dog from yesterday." Mr. Dog woofed, woof, and ran away from the lean-to, hoping with all his heart that Hussan would not bolt the door before he followed. To make doubly sure, Mr. Dog ran over to the snack van, stood on his hind legs and scrabbled at the door handle. "Oh, no, you don't," Hussan said warningly. "I'm rather afraid I do," thought Mr. Dog, as the door swung open and he dived inside. "He'll come after me all the more if I've got something he wants." He used a combination of paws and jaws to force open the little fridge inside and quickly bit into a long string of sausages. "That'll do," he thought, "distracting and delicious." "Got you!" came a man's booming voice behind him. Hussan stood in the doorway with one of the big rabbit nets, ready to hurl it over Mr. Dog. Desperately, Mr. Dog lunged forward with the sausages. Then he darted through Hussan's legs before the net could entangle him. He ran out into the courtyard, galloping like a racehorse, heading straight for the crate Hussan had placed over the hole. At the last possible second, he veered away and struck the crate with his shoulder. The jolt sent pain searing through Mr. Dog's side, but while the impact was enough to shift the crate sideways a little, it wasn't enough to uncover the hole. "What on earth has he got inside that box?" Mr. Dog groaned, snaffling one of the sausages for strength. He saw that Hussan was coming for him again with a face like thunder. This time, Mr. Dog darted behind him and circled him, trailing the string of sausages from his mouth. As Hussan tried to change direction, his legs tangled in the sausage lasso and he tumbled against the crate, knocking it over. Mr. Dog abandoned the sausages and hurried away back to the lean-to, panting wildly, making for the still open door. He saw that the space inside was filled with large hutches, one on top of another, and each containing 4 or 5 rabbits. Socks had hopped up onto a bag of grain to reach a second floor hutch, and Shoe, Flip-Flop and Sneaker were scrambling up to join him to get closer to Mother Rabbit. Mr. Dog's heart soared with happiness. There she was, pressed up against the bars of her hutch, while 3 other rabbits stuck inside with her watched on in puzzlement. "My bunnies!" cried Mother Rabbit. "All 3 of you!" And Socks, said Shoo, jumping up and down. Yeah, don't forget him, squeaked Flip-Flop, and Sneaker nodded. Mr. Dog, Mother Rabbit's eyes lit up still further. Oh, thank you, thank you. You kept your word. You've brought us back together. Very nearly, Mr. Dog could see there was no way the bunnies could get into their mother's hutch. Allow me to finish the job. He jumped nimbly onto the sack of grain and forced his head against the lid of the rabbit hutch, opening it a little way. Sneaker, Shoo, Flip-Flop, use me as a ladder and squeeze inside. Yay! Squeaked the little bunnies, scampering up the scraggy Mutt Mountain and then bundling through the open lid. All three landed safely in the thick sawdust beside their mother, and within moments started to suckle contentedly. Just keep them out of sight the best you can, Mr. Dog advised her. You'll be all right. That goes for all you rabbits. You will be taken to live safely in a national park. It's a fresh start. Enjoy it. Thank you, said Mother Rabbit with a sweet and satisfied sigh. Socks started to climb up Mr. Dog, eager to squeeze into the hutch himself, but Mr. Dog jumped down from the sack with Socks clinging to his back. Sorry, Socks. Mr. Dog lay down so the rabbit could hop off. The wildlife is not the life for you. But, Socks jumped down a quivering bundle of fur, but what will become of me all alone? I have one more idea, Mr. Dog told him, but we'll have to move fast. Hussan! Joe, Kitty's owner, was pointing to the lean-to. That dog! He's over here! Hussan! She hurried away to fetch him. Come on, Mr. Dog told Socks. One last mad rush, and be careful not to be seen. Not yet, anyway. Slipping away back to the cover of the hanging tarpaulin, Mr. Dog and Socks watched as both Hussan and Joe entered the lean-to. Then they ran and hopped together back to the courtyard, where Hussan's unfortunate tumble had pushed the crate away from the hole. This is where we came in, said Mr. Dog, and it's where I'll go out. Socks squeaked. But what about me? Mr. Dog didn't answer. He just dived into the hole, wriggled back under the fence and into the field. Socks gasped. Had he really been abandoned? But seconds later, Mr. Dog returned with his mouth full. Here. He opened his jaws, and 6 of the old gold coins fell out, pinging over the muddy floor of the courtyard. You're going to buy your bed and board with this haul of ancient money. What? Socks stared. You're crazy. You're rich, said Mr. Dog. Archaeologists love old coins, and Joe clearly loves animals too. If we put you both together, it'll cause quite a stir. How many rabbits are in the habit of finding coins? None, except for you. People will want to know where you came from, who's looking after you. Socks's eyes widened. I might find my owner again. Or you might find a brand new owner, Mr. Dog suggested, one who'll look after you properly. Socks looked down at the coins and placed a paw on them. What a fantastic plan. Thank you, Mr. Dog. You are brilliant. Quite brilliant, Mr. Dog agreed cheerily. Then he heard footsteps hurrying from the direction of the lean-to. Hussan and Joe were coming to the courtyard. I'd better clear off, he said, and leave you to your big moment. Socks smiled and nodded. But what about all the other poor rabbits out there? If the exterminator is coming for them? I'll think of something. Don't you worry. Mr. Dog backed up into the tunnel. I'm called Mr. Dog, remember? The Mr. is short for he's never missed a thing. Probably. With that, he wriggled away through the muddy tunnel and into the freedom of the field beyond, just as Hussan and Joe burst into view. Socks, sitting amid the money, looked up at the humans innocently, twitching his nose in a most appealing fashion. I don't think that was appealing, but never mind, I tried. Were you looking for something? He squeaked. They couldn't understand him, of course, but they could clearly see that the gold coins were very old and very rare and very valuable. Hussan fell to his knees in shock and started to gather them, while Joe picked up Socks. Well, you're a beautiful boy, aren't you? She said. What a morning for mysteries. Where on earth did you come from with a treasure hoard like this? Well, there was this dog, you see, Socks began. Joe could never know what he was saying, but it was a story Socks intended to say out loud as often as possible, a story about a brave, scraggy mutt with a good heart and a marvellous mind, who ran headlong into adventure, helping others along the way. A week later, one warm evening as the sun was setting, Socks sat in his new spacious two-storey hutch on the patio, looking out over the rolling countryside. Two more rabbits, a mini lop named Munchie and a lilac called Ness, lay asleep in some hay beside him. Socks had been out in a run, munching sweet green grass all day, still marvelling at how his life had changed. His name had changed too. Since he'd been found with the old gold coins, Joe from the dig had called him Treasure. The story of the bunny and the money had got into the local news, and he'd had all sorts of people sticking carrots and cameras in front of his face. Appeals were made to Socks's old owners, but no one had come forward. Happily, Joe from the dig had felt that Munchie and Ness would enjoy some more company, and so she'd taken Treasure home. Her garden was twice the size of his old place, with views across the national park. As he gazed out, Socks, he would always think of himself as Socks, whatever others called him, wondered if Sneaker, Shoe, Flip-Flop and their mother had made it safely to freedom. Suddenly, Socks froze. He'd heard a noise on the patio. A dark, four-legged figure was watching him from across the concrete. Well, well, came a familiar voice. So it is you. I knew you were around here somewhere, but thought my nose was playing tricks on me. Mr. Dog! Socks bounced up and down in his cage. Mr. Dog, it's so nice to see you. Look at my new house. Isn't it wonderful? I'm a celebrity, you know. I do know, Mr. Dog agreed, ears lopsided, his spotted neckerchief ruffled. The lady I've been lodging with loves your story. She's been telling all her friends. I heard that you'd been rehomed somewhere with a view of the park, which is why I came looking. There's something I thought you'd like to see. What's that? Well, you getting in the news caused a lot of interest in rabbits. Mr. Dog licked his nose. And I think your new owner might have let slip to a journalist that the local wild rabbits were facing a short and unhappy future. There was a public outcry. There was? Socks's ears stood up. So the wild rabbits are safe now? Well, since they weren't welcome on that private land, disturbing the dig and eating the farmers' crops, the local villagers decided to work together. Mr. Dog looked very happy. There were no end of volunteers turning up to help catch the rabbits and move them across to the national park. Socks boggled. All the rabbits? Well, no, there were plenty they couldn't reach and plenty more who didn't understand and stayed hidden in their burrows. Mr. Dog smiled, which is why I thought I'd better get involved. Socks smiled back. Of course you did. It was Hussein's idea, really. Do you remember? He told Joe they should put up signposts for the wild bunnies, directing them to the national park. But humans don't speak rabbit as I do. I scratched arrows into tree trunks and on stones. Rabbit paradise this way. And spread the word as best as I could. All the grass you can eat, and clover too. Mr. Dog sat on his haunches. I got every last rabbit so excited about the national park that, well, see for yourself. Socks peered past Mr. Dog. All rabbits have good long-distance vision, and his was better than most. He realised that one of the rolling fields was alive with silver-grey movement, a wave of wild rabbits hopping, jumping and tumbling through the hedgerows into the wide expanse of the parkland. They've come a long way, said Mr. Dog, and now they've reached their happy ending. I can't believe it, Socks shivered with delight. It's impossible. Impossible things are usually possible things hiding behind a tree, Mr. Dog declared. Those rabbits will be safe now. Do give them a wave now and again, won't you? I expect that Shoo, Sneaker and Flip Flop will be waving back at you. Oh, I will, I will, I will, I will. Socks hopped closer to the wire front of his hutch. Thank you, my friend, for everything. Mr. Dog bowed politely. My dear Socks, I wouldn't have missed an adventure like this for all the world. Where will you go now? Well, I'm rather like that Roman dig we visited. I'm roaming all over the place. Mr. Dog got up, his tail swishing merrily. I think perhaps I'll head for the coast. I do like to spend summer by the sea. With a quiet woof of farewell, Mr. Dog turned and trotted away. Happy travels, said Socks, and good luck. Good luck? Oh, yes, yes indeed. Mr. Dog looked back and gave the rabbit one last doggy grin. I never travel without that. Well, I hoped you enjoyed that story as much as I did, and I wonder if you were able to work out what happened in the end. So you'll hear this story on Thursday, and after that, I'd like you to have a really lovely weekend. Thank you for watching. Bye.